Welcome back to the Starborn Parenting Podcast. I'm Rick Cabina.
And I'm Madeline Jorgensen.
Madeline, I just got back from an amazing trip. I was in San Diego, on your side of the country. It was amazing.
I know we were gonna chit chat, and you were giving me West Coast times, and I was like, "What? Like you're on my coast? This is amazing." What'd you end up doing?
I it was just I went to a conference and it was an AI education conference learning all about what are people trying to do to teach students with AI, which is really remarkable and certainly things that we need to talk about in the future when we turn our eye to education. But wow, is there a lot going on? It's another thing parents have to learn about.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, even just like the introduction of LLMs into teaching and how to address that as parents and whether or not to allow it and behaviors that might occur because of the use of it. It's just something that our parents never had to handle teaching us things.
Well, heck, even social media for that point.
I know. I was in that sweet spot right before, like, we had a little bit of like Facebook when I was in high school, but it was just for our friends. Yeah, so I wasn't in the whole like be careful of everything you do because it's going to be smeared on social media any day. Like we were kind of in this middle ground, which was quite nice.
Yeah. I grew up as a child of the '70s. I'm old, and thank goodness none of this social because we'd be on YouTube to this day doing just crazy things. So as a Gen Xer, I was lucky.
Mhm.
But what I'd like to talk about is we have this behavior science thing. And as a parent, there's so much to be learned and being able to just share the big components of behavior science and help people understand this one thing means this. If you can start getting each one of these lessons, I feel you could get really good as a parent and use these when you understand the principles, then you understand putting them into place and actually using them to help drive behavior change in a way that you'd like it to go.
Yeah, for sure. And in our last episode, we were talking a lot about, punishment and penalty. And now we're going to start talking about more just in general, these things that can occur after a behavior, these consequences that really drive all behavior.
Yeah. There is a concept that and let me say this to all of our parents in the audience. We're using language that we hope translates. Yes, we both have a lot of behavior science friends, and I don't know if they're going to lose their minds when they hear how we're changing these terms and making them very simple, but whatever. We're going to do it, and that's what we're here for, to translate the science. And one of these terms, which I feel is a really good term, and hopefully you all do too, is something called a behavior loop. So you have a behavior, and based on what happens after, it loops. Very
Mhm.
simply, this would get at things that repeat in the future or don't repeat in the future. So if you have these basic behavior loops, like you said, a consequence can either make something happen more often in the future or make something happen less often in the future. So these loops happen and happen all the time.
Mhm.
All the time these loops happen.
If you're not aware that these lists exist, you can find yourself caught in them and you're not even aware of it. And you'll just keep going and going in circles. And this is when parents start, pulling out their hair because they're like, I just don't know how to get off this carousel.
So these behavior loops happen so frequently, and I have 2 grandkids who are over our house a lot, and that's a blessing. My grandkids are the age of your kids right now, and there can be nothing more wonderful seeing all the things that young kids do. But part of that comes with them trying to figure out what's going on in the world, and these very early behavior loops happen. So Drew, who is about 4.5, and Rowan, who's 2.5, they have just decided that when they're playing together, if one of them doesn't get their way, they're gonna fight. And the behavior loop is never clearer than when they fight. So here's a very simple example that I just saw the other day. Rowan had a toy. Drew wanted to play with that toy. Rowan said, "This is my toy," and pulled it to himself. And Drew said, "I want to play that toy," and started crying. What happened? Mom came in and said, "Oh, let him share," trying to give a rationale for why this would happen. But from Rowan's perspective, what he learned is in this situation, if a sibling wants a toy, he pulls it to himself and says, "I want that toy." Parent comes in, guess what's going to happen in the future? Same thing, because his behavior was rewarded. So you have a very clear behavior loop. And the perspective that I saw from mom, mom is trying to do right by her kids and trying to deliver a lesson at that moment. And mom going in, being very kind and explaining what's going on. Yes, that's great to do that, but understanding that these consequences, those are what are driving behaviors. And in the future, uh, I can hear them right now as we're podcasting. I think they're probably doing it again right now. That's a behavior loop.
Yeah, and these whining loops, the thing about whining is it's like it's so aversive to parents, like they don't like it. It doesn't sound good, and so they want it to end immediately. And so they're going to feed that behavior loop. Like you said, you just, you do whatever you can to stop that whining. And I see with my kids as well, like on the playground, it's like one kid grabs a toy, the other one starts crying, we get the toy back to the whiner. It's just like it's just keeps going and going. But, long term, we want to find tools to stop these and loops and get out of it instead of just keep going in this behavioral loop.
Yeah. And the real answer is when you understand that this behavior is operating on a loop, you have to teach another behavior and put that
Mhm,
behavior in a loop. And that's the whole idea of change because learning something, you don't unlearn that behavior. That behavior is there. That behavior is part of what you do as a person. And teaching something else and getting that behavior in a behavior loop, that is the tricky part. But first, you have to understand that we have these things called behavior loops, and they can increase behavior, they can decrease behavior. Like you gave I think a good example, and that is when you're a parent and something is really loud, what do? Give the child what they want, it goes away, and then that is what we call relief. Although
mm,
in that instance, you do feel relief, what's going to happen is that loop now has been established both from the child's side, both from your side, and it's going to happen more. And that's the science. That's what the science says. And you know what? If you've seen it 100 times, now you can understand why it's actually happening, what the science
mhm.
says is going on.
And to the grasses, let's take a step back and let's look at this concept of what we call the feedback loop, which is the mechanism that powers this behavioral loop. And it has essentially two parts, which is an action and an outcome. So the action is the behavior that starts the sequence, and then the outcome is the consequence that follows from it.
It sounds really simple. And on one level, it is very simple. You have some action, something happens afterwards, and it feeds back into itself. And that loop, that feedback loop happens all the time in nature, and behavior is part of the natural universe. So behavior also fits into those feedback loops. And I look sometimes just around and I look for these feedback loops and they're everywhere. And once you learn it, you can't unlearn it.
There's two different types of feedback loops, right? We have the positive feedback loop that amplifies an action, and then we have these negative feedback loops that dampens actions. And those are really the two main ones. So we'll talk about, do you want to talk about the positive one first?
Yeah. So positive feedback loops are straightforward in that the action, the loop is going to make that happen more often. You're going to get more of the behavior because this loop is going to keep feeding back on itself and it's going to happen more and more and more. Here's an example. You put your child to bed, you turn the lights out. What does the child do? I'm afraid of the dark, or there's a monster under my bed, or whatever that comment is. Parent then gives attention to the child. Feedback loop. The
Mhm.
attention served, it gave that behavior a, a boost. And the next time that the lights go out, you can expect to see that behavior again. And here's the thing that I guess we could take a sidebar before we talk about a few more examples. And that's this: when people first learn about these concepts, sometimes they think that it means if it doesn't happen every single time, something is wrong. Behavior is all about probabilities, and nobody can predict behavior with 100% certainty because we as humans are always changing. There's different things that are going on in the environment. So, with that example that I just gave you, what if you turn the lights off and the child didn't say anything? Then you may say, "Oh, well, that behavior loop isn't true." But what if your spouse put a nightlight in there and you weren't aware of it? Or what if the windows were open enough where there was light in there? Or who knows what other variable could be in there, but understanding at a basic level that these positive feedbacks work with these specific mechanisms is very important to understand why certain behaviors are occurring.
Yeah, my daughter for a while, one of her strategies was asking for a banana the moment we said goodnight to her. It was like, "No, banana, nana, nana." And it's like, "Oh, well, she's hungry. I don't want to say that she can't have food." So, you give her a little banana and then she asks for more banana. And now that she's potty trained, now her thing is, "I want to go to the potty." And it's like, "Okay, well, I can't tell you you can't go to the potty." So now she has two things that she uses back to back. Before we were like, "Oh, she's not asking for the banana anymore." But it's like, but now she's asking to go to the potty. So it's the same 5-minute delay to sleep. But the end result is she goes to sleep, so that's a win.
It is such a good example. And when you see this in children, you understand why they're doing it. And
Mhm.
what I love about the science of behavior is if you don't understand it, what happens is some people will immediately throw in these personality traits and say, oh, that's a little manipulator. There's no manipulation going on there. This
Yeah.
is a behavior that's formed because of the consequences. And it really bugs the shit out of me when people start throwing these labels on kids because they don't understand the science. And as a result, who wants to have a little manipulator kid? Those personality traits that you put on to try to explain behavior versus a very simple, straightforward way of understanding it, they don't help. How do you change someone who is a manipulator?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't really. And I mean, I think that saves my husband and I when we see behaviors like, oh, she's adding another thing to her bedtime routine that's like making it delay. But for me, I'm like, oh, that's kind of clever because every time she adds a new thing, it's like, oh, that's another 5 minutes she gets. Oh, that's another 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, I never thought about like adding multiple pairs of underwear on because then you have to take multiple pairs off and that's another 30 seconds. And it's just like, instead of getting annoyed, I'm like, oh, that's kind of huh, interesting. Like, she somehow weaseled her another 3 minutes into the routine. But, it's something to be aware of. And I think it kind of protects parents because, instead of saying like, oh, my daughter's a manipulator, oh, my daughter is such a troublemaker, or it's like, no, they just, she wants more time with mom and dad. And so they're going to come up with a billion different strategies to get just a little extra time. More time with mom
Yeah.
and dad, less time in bed. And yeah, her big thing was she would get in bed and then she'd say, all done. I'm all done sleep. I'd be like, well, you just got here. So I don't think you're all done. But she had just learned the phrase all done. So she was like, oh, this is a good opportunity. I'm all done. And I just think they're so clever. All kids, they're just so, so clever.
Yes, they are reward seeking machines, and not only are they clever, it's also really sweet when you take a step back and you look at what some of the things that the kids are doing. Uh, Here's another example that will resonate with parents, those that use screen time.
Mm.
I've seen this many times. Screens have even made their ways in schools. They seem to be everywhere. And you have a child who, okay, you've been on this for 15 minutes. It's time to take it away. Okay, what if I just watch this last part till the next 5 minutes is over? Then it's over. Then I'll give it to you. Okay. That negotiation behavior, it fits into this feedback loop. And
Mhm.
it's rational, it's understandable, it works. And what it is a very clear feedback loop. It's a behavior loop that when you see these conditions, there's screen time, there's demand to put that screen away, you can bet one of the likely things to happen next, negotiation. And that negotiation has worked in the past. And here's another thing that I'd like to point out. Just because that consequence doesn't happen every single time, it doesn't matter. If that consequence works once, it can happen 10 more times where the screen time is turned off. But if it happens on the 11th time, guess what? That is still a behavior that is in this loop, and understanding that once these loops are established, they don't have to happen every single time for them to be effective.
Mhm. Yeah, or, if you put your baby down in the crib and they start to cry and you pick them up once, it's like now they know you can pick them up, and then they're gonna cry again next time you put them down. But it has to happen every time, but yeah, kids latch on to that really fast. But so
Yeah.
we've been talking a lot about these positive feedback loops. This is when you add something. But what about these negative feedback loops? These have to do more when these are dampening that action. And so, for instance, a kid, going back to the screen time. So a kid, the kid, for instance, maybe throws a toy or hits their sister, and then, you get loss of screen time. Or maybe the kid's using the iPad and they start screaming at the parent, and the parent then takes the iPad away to then decrease the chance of screaming in the future. So these are what we call the negative feedback loops.
So we just talked a lot about those behavior loops that you're going to see the behavior happening more. There are instances where the behavior is going to happen less. And sometimes the parents want that to happen, but other times when kids are in the wild and they're just interacting with their environment, things can happen where that behavior could be dampened or reduced, and they might not like that. Let's say, for example, like I've seen this happen in the past. Very specifically, I'm at the register checking out. It's a grocery store, and next line over is mom, and the child says, "Daddy," to the cashier, and the cashier says, "I'm not your daddy." That right there, the way the cashier said it, little child innocently saying daddy, is a very common error that,
Mm.
kids when they're young, every man can be daddy. And there's this imposing person who says something in a tone which could be interpreted as harsh, and now all of a sudden, that child becomes silent when they're talking to adults. You don't want that to happen. You can't control what other people are saying, but now you have this behavior loop. You say the wrong thing to an adult, and you get this response where it's punishing. And what do
Mhm.
we know? What do we talk about with punishment? It's going to drive a behavior down and it's less likely to happen. This is a loop, and it can happen again. And then what do you have? You have a child that is less likely to interact with adults. You don't want that, but it can happen.
Yeah, for sure. That happened to my daughter a couple of weeks ago. We were at the playground and she's pretty advanced motorly. Like she can climb a rock wall. She's just turned 2. And she went to this one sort of like complicated swing system where there's like one larger swing that's attached to a smaller swing, and they both kind of swing together. And so she got on it because she knows how this works. And there was a mom nearby, and she was like, "Don't touch that." And because she thought she was this little kid who doesn't know to do things, she was going to hurt herself because the mom was trying to step in to help. But my daughter was like, "I do this every day." Like, and so she turned to me and she started crying and she came over, and now she like kind of is a little bit more fearful of this particular swing, which is too bad because like she really liked that. And the mom didn't mean anything harmful, but yeah, one time can really dampen a behavior.
There are punishments, there are penalties, and they are going to both have the same effect. And the loop where it is a pattern. Think about a behavior loop as an established pattern, and you can see this again and again. There are no lack of examples of seeing this in schools where child does something, like let's say that you have to turn in something and you turn something in and you didn't do it to a certain degree that the teacher wanted. And so then the teacher puts your name on the board and might seem innocent, might be a behavioral something that they're trying to do, but that stops the behavior from happening again in the future. Behavioral strategy, that's the word I was trying to get
Mm-hmm.
out there.
Yeah, it just reminds me of the AI and LLM use in school because now I feel like kids get away with sometimes doing poor work, but if they get away with it using the LLM, they're way more likely to use the LLM in the future because it's like, oh, they slipped by once, they didn't notice. Now I'm gonna use it again. We have a My daughter just woke up, so I can hear her in the background.
I
I
can
don't know if anyone
actually
else
hear
can.
that. I can actually hear that.
Yeah, she's with her dad. She's okay.
Well, this is a parenting podcast, and you know what? Everyone listening is saying, "I get it."
hmm Yeah, she's a sweetie, but I was hoping she'd sleep a little bit longer, but that's okay. I think my other daughter woke up too, so now the house is full of children, but that's okay. So
Yeah.
we talked about the positive and negative feedback back loops. Let's talk about some like loops in action.
Okay.
So we have like to look at it concrete, some examples of these positive loops that build momentum, whereas there's other loops that dampen it. So what are we want to create these positive feedback loops that help parents out. We want to do ones that give parents moments of happiness or relaxation. We help have the kids my daughter's just losing it. We can that help parents out. So, for instance, a positive loop would be something like a child is able to sit at dinner quietly, which gives the mom and dad or caregivers a chance of relaxation to eat as well. What amplifies is that the child is more likely to sit quietly because they're more having positive interactions with the parents instead of parents nitpicking the kids about what they're eating or yelling at them. It's like everybody has a positive interaction, so hopefully that's going to increase the chance of having more quiet and peaceful dinners. So what are some
Yeah.
other examples of these loops in action?
Before we move on, I do want to point out something with that example you just gave. If you want your child to be sitting quietly, so to speak, the rewards that happen for that child, you have to understand exactly what is the behavior that's being rewarded there. Oftentimes, the way I see it when I'm at a restaurant, how do you get kids to be quiet? You give them a screen. And now the kids are distracted, or you give them a book. One way that you could have at least some civility and some more peace is to have conversations.
Mm-hmm.
All of these behaviors that we want to happen more often have to be something that's in action. Now, you have
Mm-hmm.
to do something. So if a child is just sitting there and you say, "Hey, nice job sitting still," that's not a behavior that is going to be, it's going to be more challenging. You could say that, but you have to understand, okay, in this instance, what exactly is the child doing? Because if you're like, "Hey, nice job sitting still," but the child happens to be, scratching their behind or something like that, that's a behavior that could be rewarded, and that behavior could happen more often. But this is a technical note, and we're going to continue to talk about the behavior science, but that is an important factor that all parents need to be aware of when they're looking for the behavior loops, and that is what is an active behavior that's happening.
Yes, and thank you for pointing that out. Because when I was thinking about this example, I had this time in mind when my daughter, she would say just words loudly at the table. Like my husband and I would have a conversation, she would just start kind of just banana, gurka, tomato, just like, and instead of being like shush, like quiet, like we're having a conversation, we found that, as you said, it's moment we turned and we actually repositioned her chair so she was more like with on the side with my husband, so we were all in a conversation circle together. And once we did that, she got just as much equal attention as my husband did in our conversations. And then she stopped yelling at the table and doing it, because it's like she just wanted that attention piece. She didn't want to be left out of the conversation. So when I say like sort of sitting quietly, it's more of like she was part of the conversation even if she couldn't necessarily talk with us in the conversation. But yeah, including the kids is 100% the way to do it.
That is such a remarkable move on your part to be able to, at the moment, recognize that and do that. Kudos to you. That is amazing. And those are the kinds of tactics that, if you understand them and understand why the behavior is happening, everyone's happy in that situation.
Mhm.
There are times when it's very easy to think about behaviors that we don't want to hear, or behaviors that they're unpleasant. For example, let's say you have a child who wants something and they scream for it. Like, we have this occasionally when we just got back from shopping this afternoon, and we were pulling out the the different food items that we bought, and of course there's a tub of ice cream there. One of the grandkids saw it and said, "I want ice cream." You know what we did? We just kept on putting things away. We ignored that yell, and then nothing happened. What that taught in that instance is, in this particular situation, if you yell a demand, grandpa and grandma are not going to pay attention to that. Life's going to keep going. So in the future, we're going to have less likely to have that yelling. But you know what we could have very well done? Oh, this ice cream, we're going to give that to you later. And we could have launched into a discussion of why that ice cream wasn't available at that time, but instead we just kindly ignored it. And again, when we talk about these situations, there's always an understanding of the situation. There could be times where you would want to address a behavior. You don't want to be callous and you don't want to ignore people, but there are times when just not attending to that behavior, life goes on. It was a fraction of a second. He went right back to playing toys. She went right back to doing whatever it is she was doing. And that was the right move. But that behavior loop was there and it was clear to see. And in retrospect, like, I wasn't planning that. My wife wasn't planning that. It just happened. We had this way of, if there is a really unruly behavior like that, we've just learned, you know what, ignore it, and it'll happen less likely in the future.
Mhm. Yeah, I've also seen these things where the behavior loops can add behaviors kind of into them, where like I saw in the playground the other day, there was a kid who asked for a cracker and the mom was like, "No, we're going to have dinner, no cracker." And then he started whining and then she's like, "Okay, one cracker." And then he's like, "No, I want two crackers." And then he gives another cracker. And then by the end of the day, he was walking around the park with the entire box of crackers. And it's like, and it's like, I understand, like, some days, it's hard to be a parent, you get exhausted, and it's like, fine, just take the crackers. But it's like, they ask for one, they ask for two, and then suddenly they're walking around with the box. So,
This is behavior science. These behavior loops that we're talking about happen all the time. They happen not just for our kids, they happen for us too. Our lives have all of these behavior loops that are going on. We might not be aware of them, and that's okay, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist. And for our children, if there is a behavior that we want to increase, we want to decrease, then understanding these behavior loops and what could be some other behaviors that we could teach, that we could put into another loop that then could replace that other behavior, that is something worthy of attention and also can help explain as a parent, these are things that you can do. Y- You're not helpless. You don't have to be driven down this path of someone saying, "Oh, well, you should do this. You should," whatever their strategy is, whatever the social influencer strategy is
Mhm.
of the day. Look at behavior science. Look at how it can help you and practice this. Take notes on this. It's okay to have data on things that worked and things that don't work. That just is a way to help you become a better parent and use that knowledge to help your child.
Mhm. That's so well said. Yeah, and we're not shaming any of the cracker moms out there. I've definitely been one myself every now and then. But we're just here giving you a good North Star. It's like we're trying to teach you like what we should be doing all the time. We don't do it every time, but like we're trying our best and but you want to have a clear idea of like how to handle these behaviors and how you react and understand these behavioral loops is the first kind of way to get yourself out of them is once you can identify them. It's like, okay, I'm starting to enter a loop. Got to be careful. It's like, how am I going to respond? Do I want to continue in this loop? Yes. Okay. If not, then you got to change your behavior and get out.
Yeah. Next week, why don't we talk more about this concept, but let's even break it down more and let's
Mm.
show and talk about what is that actual frame look like. And there's the
Mhm.
behavior. There's going to be things that happen before the behavior, things that happen after the behavior, and understanding all of those components in the loop is how you can identify everything that's going on because behavior is very specific. It doesn't happen just out of the clear blue sky. It may seem that way, and that's just because we don't have all of the available history that that person has gone through. There could have been something that happened weeks ago. You didn't observe it. No one else observed it, but it happened to your child. And that could have been a good thing, could be a bad thing, depending on which way that behavior is going and how it's occurring. But just because you don't have that information doesn't mean there's not a reason for why it happened.
Yeah. Well, I'll be excited when we can look at the before and after. I'm a mom that lives in the before behaviors. I love working on that side. So that'll be a good podcast.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you all for joining us as we continue to learn how to use this behavior science to build better human beings.
Yeah, and if you found this podcast helpful, make sure to, share it with a friend and subscribe wherever you find it. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.